Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? It is cold here in New England. It's just unseasonably cold for the spring. I really like this kind of weather. This is my favorite type of weather. Like really crisp fall, that's really my favorite. Or just kind of that cold, chilly spring, unseasonably chilly, where you got to put a flannel shirt on or something like that. I really like that. This video has nothing to do with my weather and temperature preferences, but there you have it. So what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to talk about following the spirit of the rules rather than the letter of the rules. And it's interesting because that's what I've done for most of my life. And it's funny that I'm now getting a little tripped up as I'm learning new games, learning something like Ubiquity and kind of like learning all the nuances of that and using it, not just learning it academically, but let's go play this game, let's go run this game. And I've had various conversations with RuneSlinger and some other people about it. And I was just kind of wondering out loud the other day. It's funny that I was so good, or am so good at following the spirit of rules rather than the letter of the rules in like the OSR games. Let's just pick on I got this handy, Swords and Wizardry, okay? Whereas in other games, like just say like Desolation or All for One or Leagues of Adventure, I'm a little bit more. What happens is I'm not as familiar with the rules yet, so I kind of have to check a little bit more often, or I get a little bit confused by a rule, have to ask some questions. There was a couple things in Ubiquity, like the way that monsters and creatures and people are represented, which is a little bit more codified, which is something that I'm not used to, and also things like the resources video that Anthony just made. That's one of those things in Ubiquity that can give people a little bit of trouble to wrap your head around before you finally kind of understand what they're about. And even talks in that. The idea that a game like Ubiquity, just to pick on that one because that's kind of what I'm learning, so that's what I'm going to talk about. It kind of straddles this line a little bit. I agree just from what I've seen between kind of like this new school thing where in one aspect there's some rules, things are codified, but you also have to use your head and make judgment calls, and that kind of like old school sensibility. And so I found like what I'm having trouble every once in a while is applying that old school sensibility to it and making some judgment calls and realize, kind of learning the spirit of the rules and rather just following the letter. And so I kind of wondered out loud, like, why should this be the case? Because that's what I did for a long, long time. And I wasn't sure if it was familiarity, like just a lack of familiarity, which Anthony said that's probably it. That's relatively common in learning any game. I get it. So that's probably a big part of it. Or the other part, is that I'm not so sure if it was, that I was just following the spirit of the rules in like these old school games, or whether it was just there were so few rules that, for the most part, they were like these boundaries you'd encounter every once in a while in an otherwise elastic environment. These are the games where they said, you can do whatever you want. It really meant a lot of times you could do whatever you want. The reason you could do whatever you want is because there weren't rules that cover most of the things you were ever going to do. Every once in a while, you'd run into this, boundary or concrete wall. And then what I mean by that is, you declare this action, we're going to go here, I'm going to do this, I'm going to climb up this tree, I'm going to, spy on this guy, I'm going to listen to this conversation, I'm going to interact with this person. No rule for the most part. And then, okay, I'm going to hit this guy with my axe. Okay, here's a rule. Now you have to make a roll for that. And, these are the parameters, and this is what you're going to have, target numbers you're going to have to hit, and what are you using, et cetera, and out come the dice, and out come the little charts, and what have you. Or you might have another concrete wall, another barrier, where you're in some temple, and you take the idol off the podium there, and next thing you know, that's not a good thing because the whole temple starts to collapse, and there's darts flying out of the walls, and all of a sudden you say, okay, well, I'm going to jump out of the way of these darts and run out. It's like, okay, well, you have to make a saving throw. You run into the mechanics once again. And sometimes we are able to start to think about what the spirit of the rules might be in that situation, and maybe it wasn't quite as tough. So maybe you got some kind of modifier to your saving throw roll before you just, instead of just saying, okay, rocks fall and everybody dies. And over time, we learned kind of to use some nuances to figure out what exactly was going on, and did this require a roll or not? That was a big thing too. That's one of the things I've noticed in using things like Ubiquity. You're figuring out, okay, when do I require a roll for somebody's skill in something? When do I say, okay, well, this is something that everybody ought to be able to do anyway, so it's not a big deal? There were other parts of like these old school games. I'm just going to pick on them, so I don't want to get all D&D on you. But I'm just going to give the examples I'm most familiar with, where there were things that we follow the letter of the rules originally. Like, okay, magic users cannot wear armor. Okay, and then we did that for a while, and then after a while we started to think, well, or some of us started to think, well, why would that be the case? Why can't they use this weapon? Why can't they, wear this armor? Is it going to mess up their magic? Okay, probably not. It's probably a balancing kind of thing. And I love games like Lamentations of the Flame Princess, which simply say, hey, you know what? If you wear too much stuff or carry too much stuff, no matter what it is, sooner or later your spells are going to fizzle out or fail. That makes much more sense. It's just kind of, okay, what's the spirit? What are the spirits of the rules? We're trying to reinforce some kind of wizard archetype, and if you don't like it, change it. Spirit of the rules. Or the cleric cannot use edge weapons. Okay, that was one particular saint or whatever they were following, and in the inception of the game. All right, well, fine. The idea, really, the spirit of the rule is, okay, you know what, the cleric, he's a holy warrior or whatever you want him to be, but he's not Conan. He's not Siegfried. He's not that guy. So don't have him step on the warrior's toes, so to speak. Just spirit of the rules. And I can go on and on, but you get the basic idea. It's funnier, though, because, in playing these other games, sometimes I run into situations that I'm less familiar with, and then I'll have a harder time. There's more boundaries in the world than there were in these old school games. And so is it that they're less elastic? Well, in a lot of cases, not necessarily. You just have to sit back and take a deep breath and think for a while, like what's going on here. A good example that just came up, as Anthony did his video on resources, which is one of those areas where Ubiquity can be a little bit confusing for people, including myself. I asked him several questions about things like talismans and refuges and resources and allies and whatnot. Here's what happened in real life, so to speak. It was in our game, but that's in real life as far as the gamer is concerned. We play an all-for-one regime Diabolique, and at the end of this second session, which Noel Inquisitor ran, I gained a contact. Now, it's not mechanically a contact yet, but the idea is that this person, Louise de Lafayette, man, I'm terrible with French. That's why I turn on the French accent to make it even worse. She said, okay, if I need anything, I can pretty much look her up. So I'm sort of like where we become a little bit, she's in my debt, so to speak, kind of. So now I can choose to mechanically add her as a contact using the resource rules in Ubiquity and the resource rules in All for One, which is the way all Ubiquity works. You can spend experience points to gain a contact. I could make her an ally, or I could make her, I'm not sure I'd make her a patron or a contact. They all work about the same way. But I can make her an ally 0, ally 1, 2, 3, 4. They all cost more. And generally, here's where we get into the spirit of the rules rather than the letter of the rules. On an experience point basis, it's going to cost me 7 experience points to make her a level 0 contact, and 15 to make her a level 1. Then after that, you need another 15 each time. So to make her level 2 contact would be 3, or 30 rather. Or to make her level 3 contact would be 45 experience points. A lot of experience points. Here's where, at first glance, it looks like I'm just completely running into a brick wall and this won't work. Is essentially when you're looking at contacts and allies and what have you, a level 3 contact or 2 contact or ally, this talks about their social status, like who are they in the world. So am I going to think to myself, well, I really can't buy her as a contact? I have to sit there and bank like 45 or 60 experience points before I can cash in and make her a contact? And, I talked to Anthony. I said, I don't think that would be the case. If I started out as a level 0 or level 1 contact, does that just mean that our relationship is less solidified? And of course, that's the answer. It's not explicitly spelled out in the rules in this book, but that's following the spirit of the rules rather than following the letter. So once again, I'm learning over time how to make these other games, or this other game in particular, a little bit more elastic. There's still rules, there's still boundaries all over the place, but figuring out like where do I need to apply them, where do I not need to apply them, or when I apply them, how elastic are they? And I'm not talking about breaking the rules or house ruling. Just like, what is the actual spirit of this rule rather than the letter of it? And that I found more challenging than I thought it would be. What's your experience been with stuff like this? Are you just a natural and are you able to follow the spirit right away, or as you learn different games, no matter what they are, do you find yourself in this period where you become a little bit more concrete in your thinking and less flexible until you really get a feel for the system? So, love to hear your answer. Or maybe I'm alone and I'm the only guy. So, tell me about it.